Attention! Just 5 minutes ago, a shocking event unfolded. Andrei Rimovich Belousov confronted Dmitry Medvedev like never before. The audience sat in stunned silence, struggling to believe what they had just witnessed. What transpired behind those closed doors, and why did Belousov's words ignite such a strong reaction among those present? You'll want to stick around for the full story, it's bound to leave you astounded. As Belousov entered the chamber that evening, he wasn't just a high-ranking official or defense minister. He carried the heavy, invisible burden of time on his shoulders. His stride was measured yet exuded the firmness of a man who deliberates every action, every word, and every outcome. Clad in a timeless gray suit that perfectly fit his stature, he embodied precision, nothing excessive, everything meticulously arranged. His calm expression belied the intense awareness in his eyes, a trait belonging to those who have survived and comprehended epochs of change. Across from him sat Dmitry Anatolyevich Medvedev, impeccably groomed as ever in a dark suit and a subtly patterned tie. His narrowed eyes held a challenge, and his smile was tight, like a hidden jab. The room was filled with deputies and government affiliates, a collective breath held in anticipation. They exchanged formal greetings, but the atmosphere thickened immediately. It became clear that this was more than just a routine discussion, it was a clash of viewpoints, a confrontation about the nation's future. Medvedev spoke with conviction, his words striking like a hammer. Russia must respond to threats with unwavering resolve, he argued, displaying strength whilst reminding everyone that military power isn't merely a relic but a vital reminder of who reigns over Eurasia. His call to bolster defenses stirred the room, some applauded, while others shouted affirmations. Yet Belousov remained patient, allowing Medvedev to finish, only slightly tilting his head, fingers interlocked as he gauged the audience's reactions, his expression unchanged. When silence fell at last, Belousov began. His voice, although quiet, possessed a strength that drowned out the noise of fervor. He refrained from attacking Medvedev's claims outright. Instead, he reminded all, Russia has never threatened first. Those words echoed throughout the room as he looked directly into Medvedev's eyes. We have defended ourselves, never provoking others. Why then, should we allow our country to become a caricature that the West so eagerly paints? The room fell into a hushed stillness, and his next words wove through the tension. We possess everything we need to feel assured, he continued, referring to the powerful military inherited from the Soviet Union. That legacy shouldn't be waved about frivolously, it exists to be preserved and modernized. Have we learned nothing from past lessons? An arms race brought suffering, crushed economies, and made life unbearable for millions. Just as Medvedev prepared to interrupt, the audience began to stir subtly. There were nods of approval, soft chuckles of recognition, and a few cautious claps. Belousov raised his hand, signaling he wasn't finished. I respect the former Soviet Union, but I'll not forget the price of its power. The people deserve a peaceful life, one built on balance. We are strong, but strength lies not in threats but in confidence. His words echoed, heavy like a church bell in the studio, building suspense. The audience sensed they were only at the beginning of a fierce debate. The silence that followed Belousov's proclamation felt charged with energy, as every gaze, whisper, and sound wrapped around them like an electric current. Each moment had become significant. As he continued, his voice acquired a marble-like firmness characteristic of those who contemplate the impact of their words. We must not fall for provocations. Displaying sheer strength might feel powerful, yet true strength is a resource, not a mask. Demagoguery thrives in rallies, but it's lethal in governance. In that moment, the camera captured his profile, revealing a man shaped by history, with ears trained to discern the world, not to respond, but to understand. His gaze transcended the immediate, as though he were addressing not just his rival but future generations who would inherit the decisions made today. An air of awareness swept through the audience. Some felt a resonance with Belousov's composed stance, while Medvedev sensed the newfound strength of his opponent's argument, one that rendered typical accusations impotent. There was a slight frown on Medvedev's face, quickly masked by a rehearsed retort about not showing weakness or being eaten alive. Yet this declaration felt hollow, lacking genuine conviction. The audience reacted, some murmured appreciatively, while others held their breath, grappling with their personal fears. They were not mere spectators, they were invested lives woven into the fabric of their nation. In a world where threats loom large, the potential for greatness felt precariously balanced against the specter of hardship. As the discourse intensified, Medvedev painted vivid pictures of threats, economic sanctions, strategic risks, imminent dangers. His rhetoric, filled with specifics and scenarios, pulsed with an urgency that demanded attention, utilizing graphs and figures to solidify his arguments. This precision can indeed wield power, but Belousov seemed unfazed, drawing strength from thoughtful reasoning, accumulated knowledge, and a quiet honesty. "We will not deny the real threats," he stated resolutely. "But changing our economic path towards militarism only sacrifices tomorrow for today's fleeting sense of security. History warns us of such temptations, promises of just a bit longer before everything flourishes, only to leave behind weeping souls who lost what truly mattered." The room morphed into an introspective realm, reflecting the deeper fears of all present. Medvedev, ever the strategist, elevated his tone, drawing out cautionary tales of imagined futures where weaknesses convert to vulnerabilities. Without a doubt, this wasn't just a debate anymore. It had transformed into a personal mirror, showing each participant something they could not ignore. Belousov's ability to pivot from fear to hope ignited a spark, like the electric tension in the air. The stakes felt profoundly real. Was their nation to become a theater of threats, or a workshop of life? A resonant pause filled the air, the weight of every thought palpable. The cameras documented every subtle shift, every breath, every whisper, capturing the humanity behind the discourse. And in the background, someone quietly activated their phone. The buzz of social media awaited a signal, a fresh spark on an already burning conversation as the tension around them continued to grow. Summary: Dmitry Medvedev's bold rhetoric reverberated in the room as he declared the necessity for Russia to respond aggressively to threats, likening his words to hammer strikes. The audience's energy shifted as Andrei Rymovich Belousov prepared to counter. In that tense moment, Medvedev's words ignited the atmosphere, sparking a response from the audience. Applause rang out, a few even shouted their support, creating an electric buzz. But Belousov remained unhurried. He clasped his fingers, leaning slightly forward, his expression unwavering as he observed the room's reaction. Finally, when silence fell thick and heavy, he began to speak. His voice was low, yet carried a weight that echoed louder than any shout. "Russia has never threatened first," he stated, locking eyes with Medvedev. "We have always defended ourselves. Why should we allow our nation to be mocked as a caricature painted by the West?" The room hushed, captivated. "We possess a formidable military," he continued, "and an immense legacy left by the Soviet Union. This heritage is not for display but for preservation and enhancement. We must remember the lessons of the past. An arms race has not brought joy to our people, it crushed our economy and burdened millions. Do we wish to repeat that history?" Medvedev clenched his lips, preparing to interject, but the audience stirred restlessly. Nods of agreement emerged, faint applause followed, creating a tapestry of divergent sentiments woven through the room. Raising his hand, Belousov signaled he wasn't done. "I honor the Soviet Union, but I won't let its cost be forgotten. Our people deserve peace and dignity, balanced with strength." These words lingered in the studio like a bell's toll, propelling the tension forward. Every spectator sensed this was merely the beginning of a profound debate. The silence after his remarks was not emptiness, it was a vivid entity filled with curious glances, whispered speculations, and the staccato clicks of cameras. Belousov's fingers tightened around the table, not gripping metal but an invisible thread connecting his past with the nation's narrative. As he paused, a moment of gravity enveloped the room, showcasing that this wasn't just an argument, it was a pivotal moment demanding introspection. Would they follow the allure of bravado, or seek the foundation of reason? The studio felt suspended in time, heralding the dawn of a deeper conflict as the undercurrents of debate shifted, inviting every participant to ponder their own reflections amidst the brewing storm. The weight of those words hung in the room like a tolling bell. Even the cameras seemed to slow, capturing the moment when the real battle was about to begin. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was thick and alive, filled with piercing gazes, quiet whispers, and the subtle creak of camera reels. On the left, a man in a worn leather coat with salt and pepper hair and eyes sharpened by decades of watching history unfold whispered a single word, "Finally." On the right, a woman with a neat hairstyle and a copper wheat-shaped brooch clenched her fist in her palm, as if restraining a rising tide of unease. Andrei Rimovich Belousov did not break the silence just to dramatize the moment. He let it settle like a living thing, to show that what he had said was more than a passing remark, it was a verdict. His fingers, with neat and short nails, gripped the edge of the table as if holding not cold metal, but a delicate thread woven through both his life and the country's history. When he spoke again, a faint marble-like firmness underpinned his voice, the kind bred in those who weigh the impact of their words long before they leave the lips. "We cannot fall for provocations," he said steadily. "Showing off force is the cheapest form of political posturing. True strength is a resource, not a mask. And demagoguery will always find an audience. It works well in rallies, but it destroys economies." At that moment, the camera caught his profile, high forehead marked by time, a hairline etched by years, ears slightly pronounced, as if tuned to hear not just to respond but to truly understand the world's whispers. His gaze fixed a point just above eye level, as if addressing not only his opponent but the generations that will live under today's decisions. For those used to slogans and empty rhetoric, it was clear, this was a man who could hear silence. Dmitry Anatolyevich Medvedev, for his part, felt the ground shift. The position opposite him did not seem vulnerable to typical accusations of weakness. His face briefly tensed, not merely irritation, but the shock of an intellect faced with a new argument that shattered his expected assault. He tried to reclaim control by repeating a tired phrase, "If you don't respond, you get eaten alive." But in the charged atmosphere, those words sounded like a broken record. The fire that once fueled them had faded. The audience sensed the difference between genuine passion and hollow theatrics. Voices stirred across the hall, not just applause or dissent, but hushed conversations, as if sharing a new, unsettling realization. They were confronted with a stark choice, blind triumph or measured reason. What happens when the battle isn't just about power, but about the soul of a nation? And who truly holds the key to its future? The room waited, the stakes had never felt higher. In a tense atmosphere, the audience is torn between celebration and reason. On one side, an older man wears a worn leather coat, whispering a simple word, "Finally." On the other, a woman with a neatly styled hairdo clenches her fist, anxiety brewing within her. These details lend life to the crowd, reflecting a weave of personal stories intertwined with the fabric of the nation. The moderator, a young man draped in a thin scarf that seemed straight out of another era, attempted to guide the conversation back to order. But Belousov had already transcended the expected boundaries. He began sharing a personal tale, not one of grand politics or history, but of the modest home where he grew up. In a time when power outages were routine and every crumb of bread was accounted for. He recounted how his father, an engineer, taught him that strength should manifest in actions rather than words. "Bridges, factories, schools," he said, projecting a soft bitterness in his voice. These were the basic elements of life, embodying the true essence of governance. He emphasized that while a nation can take pride in its military, it should never excuse the reckless redistribution of resources at the expense of its citizens. As the audience absorbed his message, murmurs of approval mixed with apprehension rippled through the room. Some nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably, fearing the implications of their fading certainty. The conversation had morphed into a reflection of the collective psyche. Each person could see their anxieties and hopes mirrored back at them. Medvedev, maintaining his composure, pivoted to a sharper tone. He painted vivid pictures of looming threats, economic sanctions, strategic risks, and enemies poised to exploit any weakness. His message was tinged with urgency, grounded in tangible realities, maps, scenarios, statistics, and names of places. In such declarations, there was undeniable power. The specificity frightened yet persuaded, reminding the audience of the stark truths they couldn't ignore. But Belousov appeared unfazed, nourished more by a trust in rational thought and the collective experience than by fear. "We cannot deny real threats," he asserted. "Yet to shift our economic strategy to militaristic reliance for the sake of present comfort sacrifices our future." He articulated a lesson from history: the promises of prosperity often lead to despair, a little more, and all will flourish, only to end with tears of those who have lost everything in the scramble for immediate security. As he spoke, it was clear his intent was not to condemn, but to warn. His words were filled with imagery tied to tangible elements: schools, hospitals, factory lines, reminding everyone that true strength lies in caring for people, the ultimate measure of national might. When he spoke of modernization and investment, his eyes sparkled not with the triumph of theater but with the hope of a builder still convinced of a better tomorrow. The climactic moment arrived not in a loud outcry but at the instant both men fell silent, each facing the profound question demanding attention: what kind of state do we aspire to create? A theater of threats or a workshop for life? In that charged silence, each thought entered the room, mingling with the hearts of the audience. Cameras caught every breath, every furrowed brow, every clenched fist. It felt as though time itself paused as the debate sank deeper. In the back rows, someone discreetly pulled out their phone, typing furiously, a signal that social media awaited its cue. Behind the scenes, discussions spun into a whirlwind of opinions. For some, Belousov's voice resonated as the sound of reason, while others deemed it weakness. With a calm yet profound resistance to the noise surrounding him, Belousov laid a hand on the table, a metaphor for his position, conveying a strong yet serene push against the tide of chaos. As the meeting concluded, people lingered, hearts still stirred, eager to share thoughts and feelings ignited by the powerful exchange that had just unfolded. In the preceding segment, tensions escalated as Dmitry Medvedev painted vivid images of threats that loomed over the nation. The debate had shifted from simple discourse to a reflection of each participant's beliefs and fears, drawing the audience deeper into the unfolding drama. As the atmosphere thickened, Medvedev's tone sharpened, articulating a path laden with threats, economic sanctions, strategic risks, and unseen enemies ready to exploit any vulnerability. His speech was rich with specifics, maps, scenarios, and precise data that filled the air with urgency. Numbers held tremendous power; they could instill fear but could also convince. Yet, despite the rising tide of anxiety, Andrei Belousov seemed unfazed. Instead of yielding to panic, he drew strength from rational thought, cherished experience, and a quiet, unwavering integrity. "We must acknowledge real threats," he began, piercing through the mounting tension. Yet he cautioned against a militaristic pivot, arguing that sacrificing the future for a facade of safety was a perilous gamble. "History teaches us of promises that lead to despair," he warned. "A little more time and everything will flourish," often culminates in the sorrow of those who cannot endure yet another empty promise. His tone wasn't one of condemnation but of solemn warning. His eyes glimmered not with theatrical pomp but with a sincere hope, the hope of a person who still believes in progress through collaboration. The pinnacle of this intense first act was not marked by loud outbursts, but rather by a profound silence when both the challenger and the defender found themselves at a crucial crossroads. They faced a question that could not be dismissed with slogans: what kind of state do we aspire to create? A theater of threats, or a workshop of life? A stillness enveloped the studio, resonating with the thoughts of every individual present. The cameras captured fleeting breaths, crinkles of worry lining faces, fingers nervously fidgeting with napkins. Time seemed to suspend in that moment, revealing the debate had transcended to a deeper, meaningful level. In the back rows, an audience member quietly flicked on a phone, hurriedly typing away. Social media awaited its cue. Meanwhile, backstage, conversations ignited like a fresh spark. Some perceived Belousov as the voice of reason, while others dismissed him as weak. A mobile shot capturing Belousov's calm hand resting steadfastly on the table became a rapid metaphor for his resolve, serene yet resolute against the clamor around him. As the session drew to a close, the crowd lingered, reluctant to depart, the weight of the discussion hanging in the air like a dense fog, provoking contemplation and deep dialogue among the witnesses of this riveting exchange. In a space charged with unexpressed tension, the aftermath of a recent debate reverberated through the corridors. A world divided lingered as the discussions transformed into a palpable energy, a charge akin to the stillness after a thunderstorm. Moments ago, the room had echoed with reflections on national destiny. A single image penetrated the hallways, a shot of Belousov, his hand resting firmly on the table, quietly opposing the clamor around him.
The assembly didn't dissolve immediately.
People hovered in groups, their words spilling out like newly ignited sparks. "Did you hear what Belousov said?" electrified some, while others skeptically replied, "Sure, he speaks beautifully, but reality is different." Yet, through these murmurs, a deeper understanding began to emerge. This was no ordinary clash of words, it was the inception of a broader dialogue on the country's future. Belousov moved slowly, as if intentionally confronting the weight of his message, unwilling to evade the repercussions of his words.
In stark contrast, Medvedev rushed down the hallway, flanked by aides whose bowed heads illustrated the intensity of the moment.
Medvedev wore a mask of determination, as though he was recalibrating his strategy in a high-stakes chess game. The first act of this political drama concluded, yet the air crackled not with the aftermath of a loud confrontation, but with the suspense of a prolonged struggle. Two divergent paths for the nation converged in that room, and no one knew which would garner the support of the majority. The building where the debate took place retained its charged atmosphere. Each corner filled with whispers and hand gestures as colleagues debated, exchanging fleeting thoughts.
Amidst the commentary, both admiration and skepticism merged, signaling a public grappling with the implications of leadership and rhetoric. Belousov lingered at the exit, moving at his natural pace, embodying a kind of timelessness that both unnerved and intrigued the hurried onlookers. He carried a simple beige folder, tabs jutting from within, filled with economic assessments and projections. He sought not applause but a foundation anchored in facts over fleeting emotions. The conversations swirling around suggested more than just opinions, they signified a collective consciousness shifting. What would this mean for their lives? For the nation's trajectory?
As they walked away, one thing was clear: they were witnessing something monumental, an enduring dialogue that would shape their future. In a tense atmosphere filled with anticipation, two powerful figures were poised for a clash. Dmitry Medvedev, moving swiftly down the corridor, wore a look of stern determination. He brushed past reporters and onlookers, flanked by two men in suits who seemed to bow slightly against the determined wind of public scrutiny. Fresh rain had left the city vibrant, the scent of wet asphalt thick in the air, as voices swelled outside, buzzing with excitement about the ongoing debate. "Imagine if they taught economics like that in universities," a student exclaimed to his friend, drawing the attention of an elderly man nearby.
The elderly man, with peppered mustaches, adjusted his hat, nodding solemnly. Economics is defense, bread on the table, not just guns.
His quiet words resonated with those around him, sparking murmurs of agreement.
Meanwhile, on the outside steps, Andrei Rimovich Belousov stood momentarily, bathed in the glow of streetlights.
He was a compact figure with a straight back, exuding strength. Unlike many politicians who gazed past the crowd, he seemed to connect with each individual face, understanding the weight of destiny behind them.
Journalists bombarded him with questions, cameras flashing.
Yet, he spoke only a few words: "We must remember the lessons of the past and care for the future." His tone was calm, lacking the theatrics often found in political rhetoric. This simplicity struck a chord with many, as if they were conversing with a trusted neighbor rather than a high-ranking official. A voice cut through the crowd: "Now that's truly Soviet." But this encounter was just the beginning. As tension crackled in the air, Medvedev readied himself for the inevitable dispute. His mind raced with thoughts of strategy, the stakes of the debate weighing heavily on his shoulders. The battle of ideologies was about to unfold, and the audience could sense the monumental nature of the conflict. Both politicians were determined to present their visions for the nation's future, promising a confrontation unlike any other.
The question lingered: in defending their beliefs and confronting one another, what truths would emerge? The air thickened with uncertainty, electrifying the gathering storm. Would they uncover the depths of reality, or would the clash merely offer empty promises? The clock was ticking.
And while the mood simmered outside, inside the hall, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Suddenly, the dialogue transcended mere rhetoric, as layers of human emotion began to peel away. Each word exchanged had the potential to sway the tide, and the eyes of the audience glistened in anticipation, ready to witness a transformative encounter. Who would emerge victorious in this battle of wits? Would the weight of history shape their words, or would ambition lead them down a path of confrontation? Time would reveal all, as the stage was set for revelations that could define the future. In an electrifying debate that left an audience in hushed anticipation, Andrei Rimovich Belousov challenged Dmitry Medvedev, a prominent figure, igniting a conversation that reverberated through the corridors of power. What words could spark such a reaction? Belousov entered the hall, not as a typical bureaucrat but with the weight of experience etched into each step. Clad in a tailored gray suit that mirrored the seriousness of the moment, he bore an air of calm authority. His face was a study in composure, yet his eyes flickered with an intensity that spoke volumes. He was not just an observer of history, but a participant in its shaping. As he sat opposite Medvedev, whose confident facade was adorned with a perfectly tailored dark suit and an almost challenging smirk, the tension thickened in the air. The room was filled with the energy of 1,000 expectations, all clamoring for a clash of ideologies. The early exchanges, though formal, escalated quickly. Medvedev's rhetoric was powerful, each statement striking like a hammer, contending that Russia must exhibit strength, asserting dominance on the world stage, a notion that seemed to rally parts of the audience. But Belousov remained unhurried. He listened, collected his thoughts, and when he spoke, his voice, though calm, carried a strength of conviction. Russia never threatened first, he stated firmly, locking eyes with Medvedev, challenging every impression the audience held. His words cut through the noise, presenting a different vision for the country, one that advocated for restraint over aggression. A life of dignity over posturing with power. The listeners, caught in the web of his narrative, absorbed his references to the past. He spoke of the legacies of the Soviet Union, not as relics to flaunt but as lessons learned through hardship. A stillness enveloped the audience, as Belousov articulated a deep-seated longing for balance and introspection rather than reckless militarization. As tensions simmered, Medvedev prepared to strike back, but the whispering crowd had already begun to resonate with Belousov's ideas. Their murmurs reflected a collective pondering, ruminating over the choice between a legacy of fear and a vision of rational discourse. The energy in the room snapped as Belousov emphasized the responsibility that came with strength. His simplicity of speech, unclouded by rhetoric, resonated deeply, like a neighbor imploring understanding rather than a detached politician, or so one audience member noted. That's so Soviet. The debate rippled outward through the night, igniting discussions on social media and beyond. Video snippets captured Belousov's poised rebuttals about remembering the past and the political wisdom therein, flooding feeds with visceral sentiment. Comments flowed, painting a tapestry of emotional responses, young voices calling for a shift away from threats, while older generations echoed his call for moderation. As the political atmosphere buzzed with intrigue, whispers among officials reflected uncertainty about the day's events. Some lauded Belousov's boldness, while others cautioned him against appearing too soft. The political landscape, usually shrouded in discretion, began to crack open, revealing a growing appetite for discourse that transcended typical boundaries. Each remark from Belousov and Medvedev became a larger reflection of a nation at a crossroads, grappling between the shadow of its past and the hope of a recalibrated future. Who would emerge victorious in this ideological battle? The stage was set, but the outcome remained a mystery, perfectly encapsulated in Belousov's poignant closing words. What kind of state do we wish to be? A theater of threats or a workshop of life? What lay ahead was unknown, yet the resonance of their clash continued to fuel fervent discussions, both within the halls of power and across the nation. In a world consumed by digital dialogue, where would the conversation lead? The answer awaited, poised delicately between voices, waiting to be unveiled. Just hours after the intense debate, Andrei Rimovich Belousov was already asleep. Unlike many caught in the frenzy of online reactions, he never measured his words by likes or shares. Yet on the edge of his desk lay the very folder that held the weight of his message charts, forecasts, and on the first page, a single word written by his own hand: balance. That word was the key to understanding why he stepped into the studio that evening. Meanwhile, the clash between Belousov and Dmitry Medvedev was far from over. The audience hung on every moment, captivated not by the outcome, but by the fierce collision of visions playing out like an epic saga. By late night, their exchange had taken on the shape of legend. Social networks buzzed with memes, Belousov depicted as a master strategist calmly moving chess pieces, Medvedev as a fiery checkers player making abrupt, risky moves. Some laughed, others fumed, while many wrote lengthy posts praising the conversation for finally addressing the true legacy of the Soviet Union. Just then, a popular talk show aired a heated panel discussion. The guests, a military analyst, a historian, and an economist. The military expert hammered the table with his fingers. Medvedev is right. Only weapons keep enemies at bay. The economy matters, but without a nuclear shield, we'd have been torn apart long ago. The historian shot back sharply. The Soviet Union didn't fall because of external enemies. It collapsed from internal exhaustion. The arms race drained everything and stole the future from the people. The economist sighed and offered a compromise. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. But it was Belousov's words that struck the deepest. We cannot step on the same rake twice. That broadcast only fueled the fire of public interest. People were hungry for what would come next. Meanwhile, Belousov sat quietly at home. His apartment was modest, walls lined with bookshelves, an old writing desk, a chair by the window. With a cup of tea in hand, he studied his notes. 3 words were underlined in red ink: legacy, balance, future. His fingertip traced those words, as if confirming the fragile chain he'd constructed. The phone on his desk blinked relentlessly: interview requests, calls for commentary, calls from acquaintances. Yet he did not rush to answer. Clarity of thought mattered more than noise. What if the real battle wasn't about power or threats? What if it was about preserving a fragile balance between strength and wisdom, between past legacies and the future that awaited? The answer hung in the air, heavier than any headline or viral post. And as the night deepened, one question echoed quietly but insistently: could Russia afford to gamble its future on the illusions of force alone? Just minutes ago, a quiet statement rippled through the corridors of power, and it stunned everyone listening. Andrei Belousov, usually reserved and precise, faced Dmitry Medvedev in a clash that seemed to divide not just the room, but the very soul of a nation. While Medvedev thumped the table with fiery rhetoric, Belousov's calm voice cut through the tension like a steel blade hidden in velvet. What really happened behind closed doors? Why did Belousov's words ignite murmurs and gasps that echoed far beyond the chamber? Keep listening, because what unfolds next reveals a political battle not just about power, but about the future itself. Previously, Belousov's mind was sharpened and clear, despite the whirlwind around him. His phone buzzed incessantly: interview requests, urgent calls, messages flooding in. But he did not answer. His focus was elsewhere. He carefully ran his fingers over the phrase "future of the nation," as if verifying the strength of his argument before unleashing it on the world. He felt the impact his words made, but he understood one critical thing: too much attention could derail the message. It could turn thoughtful discourse into empty slogans, and that wasn't his goal. In the next room, the soft glow of a lamp illuminated his wife quietly sorting through a stack of papers. Her eyes showed a silent worry. She knew how every move he made would be dissected, twisted, weaponized. Without a word, she touched his shoulder gently and whispered, "You spoke quietly, but you spoke right." People needed to hear this. He looked up at her and nodded, gratitude passing silently between them. Meanwhile, in Medvedev's office, the atmosphere was a storm. He paced furiously, arms flailing, barking orders to his aides to prepare sharper speeches, stacked with numbers and dramatic slogans. To Medvedev, losing this encounter was merely the opening act for a larger battle. The scene was now set: 2 men, 2 voices, 2 visions for what lay ahead. One soft but stubborn, the other loud and aggressive. The real question hanging in the night air was who would capture the hearts of the people. Outside, Moscow pulsed with its usual restless energy, but even its rhythm seemed to pause, caught in the grip of this new duel. The following morning, newspapers hit the streets with headlines like "Razor Blades, Economy or Threats? Live Showdown? Belousov, Voice of Reason or Unexpected Challenger? Medvedev versus Belousov, Future at Stake?" Each outlet had its spin, but one truth was undeniable: nobody was indifferent. In the packed subway cars, strangers debated fiercely. One man, worn hands gripping a jacket, declared, "Belousov was right. Enough threats already." A woman with a brightly colored scarf nearly snapped back, "Without showing teeth, we'll be crushed." Then a third voice interrupted, young, lean, carrying a briefcase, teeth or factories in industry.
That's real power.
The debate spilled into every corner of the city, a profound reflection of the turbulent choices facing the nation.
But just as the public digests these tensions, the question lingers, in the battle of voices, which one truly holds the key to survival? Will it be the measured silence of caution, or the roaring fire of aggression?
The answer is still just out of reach, and when the next chapter unfolds, it may leave the nation breathless once again. Just moments ago, the entire city erupted into debates sparked by the unforgettable words of Andrei Belousov. Voices clashed in streets, homes, and workplaces, from a man in a worn jacket insisting it's time to stop threatening everyone, to a woman wearing a vivid scarf fearing that if they don't show strength, they'll be crushed. Another young man sharply reminded them, teeth mean factories.
But what does real strength look like when the future of a nation hangs in the balance? Amid these tense exchanges, Andrei Remevich Belousov walked toward a government building, flanked by two young aides in precise suits. Yet, he walked slightly ahead, unshielded, as if carrying a burden only he could bear. His calm face betrayed only a faint weariness around his eyes, a hint of the weight of countless sleepless nights. Inside the conference room, mid-level officials, regional representatives, and two military experts awaited. The air was thick with unspoken tension. All understood this meeting would unravel more than economic statistics, it would dissect the fallout of last night's explosive broadcast.
Suddenly, a gray-haired general broke the silence with a harsh tone.
Andrei Remevich, you must grasp this, statements downplaying the importance of weapons shatter confidence.
If we don't emphasize our military might, the world will label us weak.
Belousov placed his palm flat on the table, firm yet measured, like a final verdict. You misunderstand me. Our army is strong. That is undeniable.
But strength is not found in daily shouting, in blaring trumpets and saber rattling. True power lies in a country where people live with dignity, where their work and future are guarded not just by tanks, but by the bread on their tables.
An uneasy stillness took hold of the room.
His voice carried no theatrics, yet every word was weighted with undeniable gravity. We have already witnessed the ruinous cost of blind arms races, he continued, eyes steady.
I respect the Soviet Union.
Precisely for that reason, I remind you that its might came at a price our economy could not bear. If we stumble once again on those old mistakes, it won't be enemies who destroy us, it will be ourselves. The room fractured into reactions.
Some furrowed brows in concern, others exhaled relief.
The discussion pressed onward, but it was clear the debate transcended dry figures and reports.
It struck at the very essence, what kind of Russia awaits in the coming decades? This was no longer a duel of words between two men on television.
It had become the country's crossroads.
What happens when a single truth challenges an entire nation's reflex to flex its muscles? Can balance exist between pride and strength and the preservation of life's fragile essentials? The story was far from over. Just moments after the intense debate, Andrei Remevich Belousov stepped into the corridor, pausing by the window.
Before him stretched Moscow, a vast mosaic of contrasts. Crumbling old courtyards rubbed shoulders with gleaming glass skyscrapers. This city was a living entity, fragile yet formidable, one he was tirelessly defending from strain and chaos. A junior aide approached, nervously clutching a tablet.
Andrei Remevich, he said quietly, you're being called back to the talk show. The audience wants more.
Belousov glanced at the young man, a subtle smile touching his lips.
I'm no performer to entertain.
But when the country's fate is at stake, refusal isn't an option. Down the hall, a senior official known for his loyalty to Dmitry Anatolyevich Medvedev passed by. His glance was sharp yet laced with mockery, unspoken words sharper than any accusation. Their silent exchange carried the weight of coming storms. This was just the opening salvo.
Meanwhile, the online world burst into life. Messages poured in, some bold, others haunted, all echoing the same truth. Belousov had voiced what many felt but dared not say.
People shared memories, shuttered factories from the 90s, villages where the school was the last pulse of community, daily struggles that carved deep lines in their faces. Each account underscored his core message: balance wasn't just an ideal, it was survival. On Moscow's evening streets, the city murmured its own verdict. Street musicians played faded Soviet melodies, their notes weaving through groups of passers-by who paused, listened, and debated. Middle-aged men reminisced of better times, yearning for a chance to rebuild without repeating past mistakes. Women nodded silently, their faces etched with worry.
Above all, they dreamed of calm for their children.
Inside a secluded room, Medvedev rallied his closest supporters with a swift, steely rhythm.
"We cannot yield," he insisted. "Softness will crush us. The West waits only for our weakness."
His voice was cold steel, hardened by conviction. An aide cautiously murmured a dissenting thought, but the room hung on every harsh word.
What unseen forces swirled behind these locked doors? And how deep did the rift truly run between these two men, each claiming to fight for Russia's future?
The battle lines were drawn not just for power, but for the soul of a nation teetering between strength and survival.
Would Belousov's quiet resolve withstand Medvedev's iron will? Or would the fires of fear drown the hope for reason?
The night was far from over, and Moscow's heartbeat quickened with every whispered secret. In the midst of a heated political atmosphere, tension loomed over a gathering. Dmitry Medvedev had gathered supporters in a closed room, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade.
"We cannot yield," he insisted. "If we show weakness, we will be crushed. This is what the West is waiting for."
His voice was as dry as steel, invoking unease amongst his audience. One brave soul cautiously remarked that confidence without strength is merely an illusion. Now, media outlets were abuzz with reports of a brewing conflict. People were listening to Andrei Rimovich Belousov, his words resonating with their daily lives. A moment of silence enveloped the room, and Medvedev, narrowing his eyes, responded with icy certainty, "So much the worse for the people." This illustrated the foundational rift between the two men. One viewed the public as a partner, while the other saw them merely as an audience to be convinced through forceful rhetoric. The streets of Moscow thrummed with anticipation as a new conversation on history and future emerged. As night fell, the studio lights flickered on again, a palpable shift in the air.
The atmosphere was tense, akin to the moments before a performance when the actors step on stage, raw and unrehearsed.
The young host, already known for his sharp tongue, opened the show stating, "Yesterday, the nation witnessed a clash between two political heavyweights. Today, we explore who truly resonates with the people, who feels the pulse of this era." Applause erupted, tinged with contrasting emotions. Some applauded with fervor, while others remained reserved. A subtle acknowledgement of division brewing beneath the surface. Belousov sat confidently in his seat, embodying calm intelligence.
Dressed impeccably, his demeanor resembled a professor prepared to clarify complex realities with grace.
Despite the weariness etched on his face, sincerity shone through. He was not there for theatrical performance but for genuine discourse. In stark contrast, Medvedev exuded a more energetic presence. His movements were sharp and deliberate, emphasizing his every word as though they were lifelines drawing the audience's attention. The subtle challenge behind his well-rehearsed smile was palpable. The host directed the first question to Medvedev. "Dmitry Anatolyevich, you assert that Russia must respond to challenges with utmost severity. Yet your opponent claims, strength does not lie in threats, but in confidence.
How do you respond?" Medvedev didn't hesitate.
What followed would shape the narrative of a nation, their ideologies clashing like titans. The audience held its breath, aware that the discourse was not merely political banter, it was a reflection of their collective hopes, fears, and identities. Just moments ago, a tense exchange unfolded between two of Russia's most powerful figures, leaving everyone in the room speechless. Dmitry Medvedev insisted Russia must respond with harsh strength to the pressures it faces. But then, a calm yet piercing voice cut through the charged air, challenging that belief. Strength is not found in threats, but in confidence. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some applauded, others sat in stunned silence.
What happened next?
The spotlight shifted to Andrei Rimovich Belousov, who leaned forward, speaking not just to the room, but directly to the hearts of those watching beyond these walls.
Belousov's words rang with undeniable truth. Russia is strong, this is a fact known worldwide.
But true strength goes beyond weapons.
its economy, justice, and the unbreakable faith of people in tomorrow. The Soviet Union once proved that a superpower could rise, but it also revealed a painful lesson: relentless arms races crush even the mightiest. The hall fell into a heavy silence, even cameras seemed to pause. Belousov wasn't just presenting politics. He was sharing the lived reality of every citizen, the longing for a peaceful, dignified life. If we focus solely on missiles and artillery again, Belousov warned, we will sabotage the very foundation Russia stands upon. The enemy wins without firing a single shot. This truth hit deep. Applause broke out, not for theatrics, but from genuine recognition. Even Medvedev frowned, unprepared to respond. That pause became the night's defining moment, an unspoken admission that no quick retort was at hand. The moderator, sensing the rising tension, pushed forward. Andrei Rimovich, how can you speak of peace when we are pressed from all sides? Isn't it logical to meet strike with strike? Belousov's gaze was steady, free from weariness or anger. His voice, calm but ironclad, answered, peaceful life is not a luxury. It is the very purpose of the state. Yes, defense is vital. But defense is not only rockets and missiles. It is ensuring a doctor is in every village, work in every city, and hope in every young person's heart. When people truly believe in their nation, no external threat can conquer them. The room buzzed quietly with new energy, hope tangled with doubt. A profound question hung in the air: what kind of future will Russia choose? The clash was not just between two men, but between visions, fear-driven power or resilient trust. And as that question settled, whispers began to stir, cameras caught every breath and glance. The real battle had just begun. In a charged atmosphere, a chorus of approval erupted in the hall as someone shouted out, "That's right." The applause grew louder, and Dmitry Medvedev, anxious for silence, abruptly raised his hand. We must be strict. If we don't warn our enemies, they will sense weakness. It's obvious. The West only understands the language of power. His words carried a confident tone, but the tension in the air dulled their initial sparkle. The audience, having listened to Andrei Rimovich Belousov, seemed to be weighing two contrasting messages. One echoed fear, while the other radiated hope. The moderator turned to the audience, probing for their thoughts. What do you think, dear friends? Is strength found in threats or in balance? The crowd, which had been uncertain just moments before, suddenly united in unexpected solidarity. Applause, shouts, and cheers erupted in support of Belousov. Someone even stood, raising their hand like a solemn pledge to validate their beliefs. The camera zoomed in on Belousov's face, calm, almost stern, with a slight smile at the corners of his lips. He didn't relish the accolades, he accepted them as a sign he had been heard. Meanwhile, Medvedev sat with pursed lips, his expression betraying irritation mixed with cold calculation. He knew the battle was far from over, yet the momentum had clearly shifted to his opponent. As the broadcast neared its conclusion, the host gingerly summarized the events. Today, we witnessed two distinct perspectives. One, harsh, the other, measured. Time will tell who is right. Yet the viewers had made their choice. As the cameras stopped rolling, the audience lingered, discussing what they had just witnessed. People approached Belousov, shaking hands and offering thanks. You spoke what was on our hearts, echoed various voices. That evening marked a transformation. The debate had transcended a mere political talk show, evolving into a symbolic choice between fear and assurance, between threat and hope. In a coal miner's town in the Urals, the cafeteria buzzed with conversation as the day's shift ended. Men in work uniforms argued passionately, mirroring the political analysts in the capital. I'll tell you, Belousov, he's got it right. One exclaimed. What lies beneath the surface of power? Can a nation thrive on more than just military might? The question lingered in the air, as oppressive silence wrapped around them. They were not discussing politics anymore, they were engaged in a debate that every family could connect to, a debate that could change everything. A shocking debate shifted from screen to reality, igniting conversations in homes across the nation. In a small mining town in the Ural Mountains,
the local cafeteria buzzed with animated discussions. Tired miners, still clad in their work attire, argued passionately just like scholars in the capital. "I'll tell you, Belousov is right," proclaimed a burly miner with a soot-stained face. "We don't need cannons, we need jobs. We need our paychecks on time and our kids warm in school." A union of present and future echoed in his words, highlighting the true strength of the nation. "But if there's war," countered a younger miner with sharp features, "the mine won't save you. It's the army that matters." "We have an army," the first miner replied coolly. "But if the people are exhausted, even the strongest army can't stand." An old foreman, who had been listening silently, stood up and announced, "We've been through this before. Back in the Soviet days, everything went to armaments. Then people were left with empty shelves. I wouldn't wish that on anyone." His words struck like a judgment, silencing the man as the drone of the ventilation system filled the room. Meanwhile, analysts in Moscow were crafting reports, one of which landed in the hands of journalists, stating, "Belousov's speech is seen as a signal for change. It resonates not only with those nostalgic for the Soviet era but also with youth exhausted by endless military rhetoric." The internet buzzed with activity. Clips of his speeches garnered millions of views, with comments expressing a desire to live not in siege but in a nation with hope. Yet, Dmitry Medvedev wasn't backing down. His supporters released articles arguing that the world is harsh and without toughness, Russia wouldn't earn respect. Increasingly, those articles faced backlash in the comments. "We respect strength, but why live in fear every day?" That evening, Belousov sat again in his office, a pile of letters from all around the country spread before him. He read them one by one in notes from teachers, workers, students, veterans. People expressed their gratitude for his honesty, shared their worries, and implored him not to leave them unheard. They were all waiting for a turning point in a nation divided between confidence and fear, between hope and despair. Would Belousov meet this challenge head-on? The tense energy simmered beyond the office walls. A critical encounter with labor veterans awaited him the following day. Among them were the seasoned faces of those who had weathered the storm of years gone by. Each had a story, a lesson learned etched in the lines of their faces. The stakes were rising, and every piece of wisdom from the past could shape the nation's future. Would Belousov rise to the occasion yet again? Just a day before, the question hung heavy: how much longer can a nation live in fear? That evening, Andrei Rimovich Belousov sat alone in his office. Before him was a stack of letters, arriving from every corner of the country. He turned each page slowly, reading the words of teachers, workers, students, and veterans. They thanked him for his honesty, shared their worries, and pleaded with him not to abandon the fight for the country's future. Sitting in the quiet, flipping through those pages, he finally whispered to himself, "So, I did everything right." But deep down, he knew the hardest trials were still ahead. The very next day, the capital hosted a gathering with labor veterans. These were not ceremonial guests coming for empty applause, they came to speak openly. The room smelled of fresh paint mixed with the scent of aged wood. Chairs creaked under the weight of the elderly as they settled in, yet the atmosphere was unexpectedly warm. A tall, lean man with silver hair stood up. His voice carried the weight of memory and loss. "We remember when the Union was a source of pride, but we also remember the cost. We respect the army, we respect the weapons, but we do not want our children standing in bread lines again." Andrei Rimovich, your words echo what we feel inside. Thank you. Belousov's reply was simple but profound: your work and your generation gave us strength. It is our duty not to waste it. I speak not for showmanship, but so that your grandchildren live better than we did. The applause that followed was quiet but lasted long. Filled with sincerity and trust heavier than any televised ovation. It was a sound that resonated deep, an unspoken bond of faith between the speaker and those who had endured so much. Meanwhile, political circles buzzed like a hive. Some saw Belousov as the voice of a new era, a future leader who dared to challenge the old order. Others viewed him as a threat to the established power. His words stirred nerves that no one could afford to ignore. Dmitry Medvedev's camp intensified their rhetoric. His supporters prepared speeches, articles, and reports demanding a hardline stance. The louder the calls for threat and force, the more people turned toward the steady voice promising calm and balance. By the end of the week, a brief note appeared in newsfeeds. Polls showed Belousov's speech sparked a surge of public trust, especially among older and middle-aged citizens. But these numbers only confirmed what was already clear to anyone paying attention. The real question now was, could this quiet strength withstand the storm that was building? Would reason prevail over fear? The stage was set, and the nation watched, breath held, waiting for what would come next. By the end of the week, it was clear the nation had heard his message. Polls confirmed growing trust in his words, especially among older and middle-aged citizens. These numbers simply echoed what was visible without surveys, a deep shift taking root in the hearts of many. On a quiet Saturday evening, as he stepped out of the ministry building and paused at its entrance, an elderly man approached him. The man held a carefully folded, worn red flag. With steady hands, he offered it forward and said, "This flag belonged to my father. He fought for this country. Guard it well, for what he lived and bled to protect." Belousov accepted the flag gently, as one would cradle a sacred relic. In that moment, something changed within him. His words were no longer just a debate in a studio, they had become a solemn vow, a promise made to an entire generation. This was the weight of history pressing down, but also the spark of hope lighting the way forward. Our story closes here, but what we witnessed was nothing short of profound. The voice of one man's reason sparked a national conversation. A clash of ideas in a room transformed into a symbolic crossroads for an entire country's future. Is strength found in fierce threats or in the calm of reason? That question now hangs in the air, waiting for an answer only time can reveal. What will you choose? Will you stand for the fire of battle cries, or the steady hands that build life? Remember, the stories you carry, the fears you hold, the hopes you nurture, they are the true pulse of this moment. The debate lives on. The nation listens. What will your story be? Earlier, we saw how Andrei Rimovich Belousov stood up to Dmitry Medvedev, challenging the aggressive rhetoric many were growing tired of. This bold move wasn't without risk. Some cautious voices wondered if there was a deeper wisdom in advocating for reason over confrontation. Political battles often lurk in shadows, but this time, debates leaked into the open, insights and hints spilling into the media like sparks from a fire. Now, news outlets sensed something big unfolding. Journalists rushed to contact aides, hunting for comments and predictions. Newspapers were preparing morning headlines screaming of a new Kremlin fault line, Belousov versus the threat, economy or arms. Nobody knew how this clash would end, but the mere fact of an open argument became an event in itself. Meanwhile, miles away in a modest apartment at the city's edge, a student who had watched the broadcast found himself at the center of a fiery discussion. Around a kitchen table, two aspiring engineers and a history student debated wildly. Steam rose from glasses cradled in metal holders as their voices swelled. "I'm telling you," one young man insisted, "if Belousov wins, there's hope. Factories, science, production, this is what matters more than brandishing fists." "What if we get attacked tomorrow?" the history student countered, gripping her cup tight as though it were a lifeline. "Can the economy stop an invading force?" The student, calm but firm, answered, "Neither arms races nor economies alone save us. History has already shown that." These arguments echoed across the nation, in offices, lecture halls, commuter trains, and backyard benches. People grappled not just with who spoke louder but with the bigger question, what path should Russia take? This ceased to be a debate for the elite, it became a conversation woven into everyday life. As dawn crept in, a terse report appeared in a closed circle of officials. Belousov's speech earned positive responses, especially from older and middle-aged generations. Medvedev was seen as harsher but sometimes less convincing. These words passed quietly between hands, each reader interpreting them through their own lens. Meanwhile, Andrei Belousov himself had long since slipped into sleep. He didn't track online reactions or count approval with likes and views. In his dimly lit office, a folder sat near the edge of his desk, marked simply with one handwritten word on the first page, balance. The question now hung heavy in the air: could balance become the foundation for Russia's future, or was it a fragile illusion in times of turmoil?
What happens when the heartbeat of a nation pulses between hard power and cautious reason? The story was far from over. Yet, a silent tension had been unleashed, ready to ripple through corridors of power and everyday life alike. What would unfold next? Would the bold voice of reason finally pierce through the noise, or would the clash spiral into deeper divides? Something crucial was brewing beneath the surface, and no one could look away. In a riveting turn of events, 5 minutes ago, a shocking confrontation took place where Andrei Rimovich Belousov decisively challenged the formidable Dmitry Medvedev. The atmosphere in the room was electric, with disbelief rippling through the audience as they processed what they had just witnessed. What transpired behind those closed doors, and why did Belousov's words ignite such fervor among the onlookers? Stay tuned, as this unfolding saga promises to unveil the unexpected. As Belousov stepped onto the stage, he was not just another bureaucrat, he embodied the weight of history. Calm yet resolute, he was dressed in a tailored gray suit that spoke of purpose and intention. The audience immediately sensed an undercurrent of tension as he took his seat across from Medvedev, whose well-pressed attire and calculating gaze betrayed a competitive spirit. Their initial exchanges were polite, but the air crackled with unspoken challenges. Medvedev's dialogue, sharp and assertive, resonated like the clang of thunder. He pronounced that Russia must fiercely respond to threats, wielding its military not as a relic, but as a powerful tool to assert dominance in Eurasia. The room reverberated with applause, some even called out words of support, feeding Medvedev's fervor. But Belousov remained composed, listening carefully, his fingers intertwined in contemplation, not betraying a single flicker of emotion on his face. When silence fell, he spoke with a calm strength that captivated the room. Russia has never been the aggressor, he affirmed, locking eyes with Medvedev. We defend our sovereignty. Not distorted into a caricature for the West's entertainment. His words struck a chord, causing the audience to lean in, hungering for more. This was not merely about politics, it was about aspirations, fears, and the core identity of a nation. As he continued, he cited the knowledge inherited from the Soviet era, insisting that accumulated strength should serve the people, not be displayed as a show of force. We are strong, he stressed, but power lies in conviction, not intimidation. Each voice in the audience reflected a deep contemplation, understanding they were not just witnesses to a debate but participants in their country's narrative. The tension escalated further as Belousov recalled a childhood memory. He spoke of ration electricity and the cherished simplicity of sharing bread, simple yet poignant illustrations of sacrifice. The silence that followed his recollections was thick with unspoken understanding, a moment of introspection in a heated discourse. The facts were undeniable. The ongoing weapons race had not uplifted society, it had burdened the economy and created despair. The emotional resonance of his speech left an indelible mark on many. We must tread carefully, respecting our past yet daring to envision a balanced future, he concluded, and the room buzzed with murmurings, as individuals grappled with these profound reflections. Medvedev, never one to back down, ramped up the intensity of his retorts, painting dire scenarios filled with external threats and strategic uncertainties. However, it was clear that Belousov had shifted the temperature of the conversation. Each detail Medvedev presented, while alarming, lacked the compelling authenticity of Belousov's vision, a clearer, more hopeful path rooted in realism. With subtlety, Belousov challenged the script of traditional rhetoric, urging a dialogue based on wisdom and foresight rather than mere bravado. The audience was no longer just listening, they were reflecting their own fears and aspirations within the ideological battle unfolding before them. As the conversation spiraled into realms deeper than surface arguments, it became evident, this was not merely a debate but a reflective dialogue on the very soul of Russia's future. Every voice, every whisper captured a longing to reconcile strength with reason, as a significant crossroads unfolded not just within the walls of the studio, but across the hearts of the nation. The sensation of the evening lingered in the air like a symphony waiting for its crescendo. Unbeknownst to the speakers, discussions beyond the studio walls had already begun, hungry for the insights shared that could potentially shape the country's trajectory. As the night wore on, the tension remained palpable, like the moment before a storm breaks, with the world waiting to see which way the winds would ultimately blow. In this gripping saga, where ideologies clash and visions for the future collide, every heartbeat in the audience echoed the question that would define generations to come:
What kind of state do we wish to forge, one driven by fear or by hope?